Life can change in an instant. For Jack Mitchell, a 39-year-old electrician from Lakeland, Minnesota, that moment came on a frigid January morning when the ice cracked beneath his daughter's feet. What followed would test the limits of a father's love, drain his last dollar, and ultimately bring a miracle that no one could have predicted. This is the story of how one man's selfless act of courage set in motion a chain of events that would transform not just his life, but an entire community. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The ancient pines lining the edge of Cedar Lake stood as silent witnesses to the unfolding tragedy. Jack Mitchell had brought his 8-year-old twin daughters, Emma and Lily, to the frozen lake on what was supposed to be a carefree Saturday morning. The temperature had hovered around 12 degrees for nearly 2 weeks, and the lake was a popular spot for ice skating and winter activities. Local authorities had declared the ice safe just days earlier. "Stay where I can see you," Jack called out to his daughters as he adjusted his worn gloves. The twins, identical except for the color of their winter hats, Emma in blue, Lily in purple, were already gliding across the ice, their laughter carrying across the frozen expanse. Jack watched them with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. The past 18 months had been a brutal uphill climb. After his wife Sarah's sudden death from an undiagnosed heart condition, he had been barely keeping his head above water, emotionally and financially. The medical bills from her final hospital stay had wiped out their modest savings, and business at his small electrical company had slowed to a trickle during the economic downturn. He had been forced to let go of his 2 employees and was now working solo jobs, often pulling 18-hour days just to make ends meet. The house they had bought together was 3 months behind on mortgage payments, and the bank had started sending foreclosure notices. His truck needed repairs he couldn't afford, and the twins' winter boots had been purchased from a second-hand store the previous month, but none of that mattered when he saw Emma and Lily skating. Their joy was a rare, bright spot in the darkness that had enveloped their family. Jack smiled as he watched them attempt to spin, holding hands and giggling when they tumbled onto the ice instead. He turned away momentarily to check his phone. There was a potential job opportunity that could help catch up on at least one mortgage payment. As he thumbed through the email details, the peaceful morning was shattered by a sound no parent ever wants to hear: the terrified screams of their children. Jack's head snapped up to see Emma and Lily no longer on the main skating area. They had wandered farther out onto the lake, near a section that curved around a small peninsula. There, the ice was beginning to spiderweb beneath them with ominous cracks. "Don't move!" Jack shouted, already running across the ice. His heart hammered against his ribs, a primal fear coursing through his veins. He had grown up around these lakes and knew the dangers all too well. A childhood friend had fallen through the ice 25 years ago and never resurfaced. The girls stood frozen in terror, holding each other's hands as the ice continued to crack beneath them. Jack's mind raced. He needed to distribute his weight. Dropping to his stomach, he began to crawl toward them, the cold seeping through his jeans and jacket. "Daddy!" Lily cried, her small voice quivering. "It's okay, sweetie, just don't move," Jack called, trying to keep his voice steady despite the fear threatening to overwhelm him. "I'm coming to get you both." He was about 15 feet away when the ice beneath Emma gave way. With a startled cry, she plunged into the freezing water, dragging Lily with her. The siblings' grip on each other never loosened, even as the freezing water engulfed them. Jack didn't hesitate. He scrambled to his feet and ran the remaining distance, the ice cracking beneath his boots. With a powerful leap, he threw himself into the water after his daughters. The shock of the cold was like 1,000 knives stabbing every inch of his body at once. The temperature stole his breath, but adrenaline kept him moving. Beneath the Murky water, he could see the twins' brightly colored hats as they thrashed and sank. Emma had already gone limp, while Lily was weakly kicking, her movement slowing by the second. Jack's lungs burned as he dove deeper, wrapping one arm around each girl. With strength he didn't know he possessed, he kicked toward the surface, fighting against the weight of their waterlogged winter clothes. Breaking the surface, he gasped for air, struggling to keep both girls' heads above water. The edge of the hole was slick with ice, and each attempt to pull them out resulted in more ice breaking away. "Help!" Jack shouted, his voice echoing across the lake. "Somebody help us!" But the section of lake they had wandered to was hidden from the main area by the peninsula. No one could see them, and his cries were swallowed by the vast wilderness surrounding them. Emma wasn't moving. Lily's eyes were half closed, her lips already taking on a blue tinge. Jack knew hypothermia was setting in rapidly. They had minutes, not hours. With one hand he fumbled for the pocket knife he always carried, a gift from his father on his 12th birthday. Gripping it between his teeth, he managed to stab it into more solid ice several feet away. Using it as an anchor, he pushed the girls up first, rolling them onto the more stable ice surface before pulling himself out with trembling arms. But they weren't safe yet. The ice could still break beneath them, and the twins weren't responding. Jack gathered both girls into his arms, one over each shoulder, and began to crawl away from the hole, distributing his weight as much as possible. Every movement was agony. His clothes were rapidly freezing, becoming stiff and heavy. His hands were numb, his vision starting to blur at the edges, but he kept moving, one agonizing inch at a time, until he reached the shore, collapsing onto the snow-covered ground. Jack laid the girls down gently. Emma's lips were blue, her skin pale as porcelain. Lily was barely conscious, her breathing shallow and irregular. Jack's first aid training kicked in. He needed to get them warm, but they were a half-mile from the parking lot where his truck was parked. With frozen fingers, he fumbled for his phone, only to find it waterlogged and dead. "Stay with me, girls," he pleaded, tears freezing on his cheeks as he began CPR on Emma. Her small chest rose and fell under his hands as he counted compressions. 1, 2, 3. "Breathe for Daddy, Emma. Please breathe." After what felt like an eternity, Emma coughed weakly, water spilling from her mouth. Jack nearly collapsed with relief, quickly turning her onto her side to help clear her airway before checking on Lily, who was still conscious but fading fast. "I need to get you both warm," he murmured, stripping off his soaked outer jacket and wrapping it around the twins. He scooped them up, one in each arm, and began the grueling trek back to his truck. Every step was torture. His wet clothes clung. To him, the bitter wind cutting through the layers like they weren't even there. His boots, filled with icy water, squished with each step. But he kept moving, driven by the precious burden in his arms. By the time Jack reached the parking lot, he could barely feel his extremities. His truck, a 2002 Ford F-150 with over 200,000 miles on the odometer, was the only vehicle in sight. The remote lake access point was deserted. No one else had braved the bitter cold that morning. With clumsy movements, Jack managed to get the doctor open and place the girls inside. He cranked the heat to maximum, though the aging system took several minutes to produce any warmth. Using the emergency blankets from his roadside kit, he wrapped the twins as best he could before climbing behind the wheel. The nearest hospital was in Riverside, a 30-minute drive under normal conditions. Jack knew that with the icy roads and his own deteriorating condition, it would take longer. But they didn't have a choice. "Stay awake," he told the girls, his voice rough with fear and exhaustion. "Talk to Daddy. Tell me about what you want for your birthday." Their 9th birthday was 2 weeks away. Jack had been picking up extra shifts at a friend's construction company on weekends, saving every penny to buy them the art supplies they had been begging for. The twins had inherited their mother's artistic talent, and drawing had become their escape from grief. "I want new colors," Lily murmured, her words slurring. Emma didn't respond at all, her eyes closed, breathing shallow. Jack's own vision was beginning to dim around the edges. The truck swerved slightly as he fought to stay conscious, his wet clothes now freezing to his skin. The heater was finally producing warm air, but it wasn't enough to counteract their severe cold exposure. The rural highway stretched before him, empty and unforgiving. Jack's hands were so numb he could barely grip the steering wheel. Twice, the truck drifted onto the shoulder before he managed to correct its course. "Almost there," he said, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the girls or himself. "Just a little further." When the lights of Riverside Community Hospital finally came into view, Jack nearly wept with relief. He pulled up to the emergency entrance with a screech of tires, honking desperately until he saw orderlies rushing out with gurneys. "My daughters," he managed to say as he stumbled from the truck, "fell through the ice. Please help them." The hospital staff moved with practiced efficiency, quickly transferring Emma and Lily onto gurneys and rushing them inside. Jack tried to follow, but found his legs would no longer support him. As the darkness closed in, the last thing he saw was a nurse's concerned face hovering above him as he collapsed onto the icy pavement. Jack awoke to the steady beep of a heart monitor. The room was dim, a single light casting shadows across unfamiliar walls. For a moment he couldn't remember where he was or how he had gotten there. Then it all came rushing back. The ice, the freezing water, the desperate drive to the hospital. "My girls," he croaked, trying to sit up. Pain shot through his body and he fell back with a groan. "Easy there, Mr. Mitchell." A nurse appeared at his bedside, gently pressing him back against the pillows. "You've been through quite an ordeal." "My daughters," Jack insisted, his voice breaking. "Emma and Lily, they're stable," the nurse assured him. "Dr. Reeves will be in shortly to give you all the details. You've been unconscious for nearly 18 hours. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 18 hours. Jack closed his eyes, relief washing over him in waves. The girls were alive, but stable could mean anything. He needed to see them, to touch them, to know they were truly okay. Dr. Reeves, a woman in her 50s with silver streaks in her dark hair, entered the room a few minutes later. She carried a tablet and wore an expression that Jack couldn't quite read. "Mr. Mitchell," she began, pulling up a chair beside his bed. "First, let me say that what you did was extraordinary. You saved your daughters' lives yesterday." Jack swallowed hard. "Are they okay? Can I see them?" "They're both responding well to treatment," Dr. Reeves said carefully. "Emma experienced severe hypothermia and some water inhalation. We had her on a ventilator for the first 12 hours, but she's breathing on her own now. Lily's condition was slightly better, though she also suffered moderate hypothermia." "But they'll recover?" Jack pressed, his heart in his throat. "We expect both to make a full recovery," Dr. Reeves confirmed. "However, there are some concerns about potential long-term effects from the cold exposure. Emma's extremities were severely affected. We're monitoring for tissue damage, particularly in her hands and feet." Jack felt the blood drain from his face. "What kind of damage?" "It's too early to know for certain," Dr. Reeves said gently. "But there's a possibility of lasting nerve damage or, in the worst case, the need for partial amputation of some fingers or toes." The words hit Jack like physical blows. The thought of his vibrant, artistic daughter losing her fingers, the fingers that created such beautiful drawings, was almost too much to bear. "As for you," Dr. Reeves continued, "you're suffering from hypothermia, exhaustion, and moderate frostbite on your extremities. You also have 2 cracked ribs, likely from performing CPR, and various cuts and bruises. You need rest and continued treatment." Jack barely heard her. His mind was racing with implications and fears. The medical bills would be astronomical, far beyond what his limited insurance would cover, and if Emma needed specialized treatment or, God forbid, surgery. "When can I see them?" he asked, pushing aside thoughts of financial ruin for the moment. "They're in the pediatric ICU. We can arrange for you to be taken there in a wheelchair once your IV treatment is complete." Dr. Reeves studied him with compassionate eyes. "They've been asking for you. Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the uncertain future, Jack felt a small flame of hope ignite in his chest. His girls were alive. They were asking for him. Everything else was secondary. 3 hours later, a nurse helped Jack into a wheelchair and pushed him toward the pediatric ICU. Every movement sent pain shooting through his battered body, but he barely noticed. His focus was entirely on seeing his daughters. The twins had been placed in the same room, their beds positioned side by side. Both were connected to monitors, with IV lines running into their small arms. Lily turned her head as Jack was wheeled in, her face lighting up despite her obvious exhaustion. "Daddy!" she called weakly. Emma's reaction was slower, her eyes heavy with medication, but a small smile curved her lips when she saw him. Jack didn't bother fighting the tears that spilled down his cheeks as the nurse positioned his wheelchair between their beds. He reached out, taking one of their hands in each of his, careful of the IV lines. "Hey, my brave girls," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You scared Daddy half to death." "You saved us," Lily whispered. "You jumped in. The cold water. The doctor said you're a hero," Emma added softly. Jack shook his head. "I'm just your dad. That's what dads do." He squeezed their hands gently, noticing that Emma's fingers were still cool to the touch. "How are you feeling, sweethearts?" "Tired," Lily said, "and my chest hurts when I breathe deep. My hands and feet feel funny," Emma admitted, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "Like when your foot falls asleep, but all the time." Jack forced a reassuring smile, though his heart was breaking. "The doctors are going to take good care of you both. You just focus on getting better, okay?" As he sat between his daughters, Jack tried to project strength and confidence, but inside he was drowning in a different kind of cold, the icy fear of what the future held, and how he would manage to protect his family from the gathering storm. What he didn't know was that news of his heroic rescue was already spreading beyond the walls of Riverside Community Hospital, setting in motion events that would soon arrive at his doorstep in the form of 10 black SUVs, bearing an unexpected miracle. The story of Jack Mitchell's heroic rescue spread through Riverside like wildfire. By the following day, local news vans had gathered outside the hospital, eager to interview the dad who had risked everything to save his daughters. The hospital staff formed a protective barrier around the family, shielding them from the media frenzy as they focused on recovery. Dr. Reeves was reviewing Emma's latest test results when she noticed Jack staring at the pile of forms on his bedside. Table, insurance documents, treatment authorizations, and financial assistance applications. The weight of his worry was etched into the lines of his face. "You should be resting," she said, closing Emma's chart. Jack looked up, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. "How am I supposed to rest? My daughter might lose her fingers, and I can't even afford the mortgage on our house, let alone whatever all this is going to cost." He gestured weakly at the hospital room. Dr. Reeves pulled up a chair. "The social worker will be coming by this afternoon to discuss financial assistance options. And I've seen these kinds of cold injuries before. Children are remarkably resilient. Emma's circulation is already showing improvement. And if it doesn't improve enough?" Jack asked, voicing his deepest fear. The doctor's silence was enough. "I should have watched them more carefully," Jack whispered, dropping his head into his hands. "Sarah would have never let them wander that far out on the ice." "You can't do that to yourself," Dr. Reeves said firmly. You saved their lives, Mr. Mitchell. Many people would have frozen in panic or been unable to act. Your daughters are alive because of you." A nurse appeared in the doorway, interrupting their conversation. "Dr. Reeves, you're needed in the pediatric ICU. Emma Mitchell is asking for her father." Jack was on his feet immediately, ignoring the pain that shot through his body. "Use the wheelchair," Dr. Reeves insisted, motioning to the nurse to bring one. "The last thing we need is for you to collapse again." When they reached the pediatric ICU, Jack was relieved to see both girls awake, though Emma's face was tight with discomfort. "Daddy, my hands hurt," she said, as soon as she saw him, tears rolling down her cheeks. Jack moved to her bedside, gently taking her small hand in his. Her fingers were warmer now, with some healthy pink returning to the skin. "A good sign. That's actually a good thing, sweetheart. It means the feeling is coming back." He glanced at Dr. Reeves, who nodded confirmation. "The pain means circulation is returning. We're going to give her something for the discomfort, but this is actually positive progress." For the first time since the accident, Jack allowed himself to feel a flicker of genuine hope. That afternoon, as promised, the hospital social worker visited. Teresa Warren was a competent woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Mitchell," she said after reviewing his paperwork. "Even with your insurance, the out-of-pocket expenses will be substantial. But there are programs we can apply for, and the hospital has a financial assistance fund. For cases like yours." Jack nodded numbly, his mind struggling to process numbers that seemed insurmountable. "What about ongoing care? Emma might need physical therapy, and there's still a chance of complications." "One step at a time," Ms. Warren advised. "Let's focus on getting through the immediate treatment first. But you should know that the local news coverage has generated some interest. People are asking how they can help." "I'm not looking for charity," Jack said immediately, his pride bristling despite his desperate situation. Ms. Warren gave him a measured look. "It's not charity, Mr. Mitchell. It's a community. Sometimes we need to let others help us, especially when we've spent so much time helping everyone else." Jack thought about the families whose homes he'd rewired at cost when they couldn't afford full price, the elderly neighbors whose driveways he cleared every winter without being asked, the youth baseball team he'd sponsored the previous year despite his own financial struggles. Sarah had always said their wealth was in their community, not their bank account. "I'll think about it," he conceded. By the time Jack was discharged 3 days later, Emma and Lily were showing remarkable improvement. The doctors had downgraded Emma's condition, optimistic that she would retain full function of her hands and feet with proper care and physical therapy. Lily had bounced back even faster, her resilient spirit seemingly undiminished by the ordeal. The girls would need to remain hospitalized for at least another week, with Emma possibly staying longer, depending on her progress. The thought of leaving them tore at Jack's heart, but he had practical matters to address, the most pressing being their impending home foreclosure. The bank had called twice while he was in the hospital. The deadline for bringing the mortgage current was just 5 days away, and Jack was still thousands short. He needed to return to work immediately if there was any chance of saving their home. As Jack signed the discharge papers, Ms. Warren appeared with a small envelope. "This came for you yesterday," she said. "It's not much, but it's a start." Inside the envelope was a check for $200, a collection taken up by the hospital staff. Jack stared at it in disbelief, tears welling in his eyes. "I can't—" "Yes, you can," Ms. Warren interrupted gently. "And you will. For your girls." Jack accepted the check with trembling hands, humbled by the generosity of people who were essentially strangers. "Thank you. Please tell everyone, just thank you," Ms. Warren smiled. "I will. And Jack, there's a reporter who's been particularly persistent about interviewing you, Melanie Cooper from KRTV. She seems genuinely interested in helping." You might want to consider talking to her. Jack had been avoiding the media, uncomfortable with the attention and wary of exposing his family's struggles to public scrutiny. But if it could help keep a roof over his daughters' heads. Give her my number, he decided. On the drive home, Jack called his friend Marcus Reynolds, who had been checking on the house during their absence. Man, you wouldn't believe how many people have been dropping stuff off, Marcus reported. Your porch is piled with food, gift cards, winter clothes. For the girls. And someone left an envelope with $500 in cash. No name, just a note saying from one parent to another. Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. And the mail? Any more notices from the bank? Just the usual bills, Marcus said. But hey, I talked to Pete at the garage. He said to bring your truck in. He wants to fix that transmission issue free of charge. Says it's the least he can do after you rewired his mother's house last year for next to nothing. By the time Jack reached home, it was late afternoon. The modest two-story house, the one he and Sarah had purchased with such excitement 7 years ago, looked tired in the winter light, its paint peeling and shutters askew. But it was home, filled with memories of better days and the echoes of his daughter's laughter. The porch was indeed stacked with boxes, bags, and containers, tangible evidence of community compassion. Jack carried everything inside before collapsing. On the couch, the emotional and physical toll of the past few days crashing over him like a wave. Despite his exhaustion, sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his daughters disappearing beneath the ice, felt the bite of the freezing water against his skin, and beneath the trauma lay the crushing weight of financial reality. The community's generosity, while deeply touching, wouldn't be enough to save their home and cover the ongoing medical expenses. The next morning, Jack forced himself back to work. His first job was rewiring an office building downtown, a project he had secured before the accident. The client, understanding Jack's situation, had agreed to advance him half the payment, which would go straight to the bank. As he worked, his body protesting every movement, Jack's phone rang. It was Melanie Cooper from KRTV. Mr. Mitchell, thank you for agreeing to speak with me, she began. First, let me say how relieved everyone is that you and your daughters are recovering. Thank you, Jack replied cautiously. I appreciate all the support we've received. I'd like to tell your story if you're willing, Melanie continued. Not just the rescue, but what led up to it and what you're facing now. People need to hear about real courage, real sacrifice. Jack hesitated, uncomfortable with the idea of exposing his personal struggles. I'm not looking for publicity, Ms. Cooper. This isn't about publicity, she assured him. It's about letting people know what they can do to help, and maybe inspiring others who are going through tough times themselves. After a long pause, Jack agreed to meet her after he finished work. It wouldn't solve their problems, but at this point, he was willing to try anything that might help secure his daughter's future. The interview took place at a small coffee shop near the hospital, allowing Jack to visit Emma and Lily before and after. Melanie was thorough but compassionate, gently drawing out details about Sarah's death, the financial struggles that followed, and the terrifying moments on the ice. The thing is, Jack found himself saying, I'm not special. Any parent would have done the same. You don't think about the danger when it's your child in trouble. You just act. But not everyone would have been able to do what you did, Melanie pointed out. You maintained your presence of mind, remembered your first aid training. You saved them both and then drove them to safety despite your own injuries. Jack shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. They're everything to me. After Sarah died, they're all I have left. And now you're at risk of losing your home, just as they're recovering from this trauma, Melanie said quietly. Jack looked away, shame coloring his face. The medical bills, the mortgage. It's just too much. I've tried everything. Extra jobs, payment plans, but there's only so many hours in a day, and I need to be there for my girls too. Would you mind if we included these details in the story? It might generate more support. After another long hesitation, Jack nodded. If it helps. Keep a roof over their heads, then yes. The story aired 2 days later. Melanie had done a masterful job, focusing on Jack's quiet courage and the twins' resilience rather than sensationalizing their hardship. The piece ended with information about a fund the station had established to help the Mitchell family. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By the following morning, the fund had received over $30,000 in donations. Jack sat at his kitchen table, staring at the email from the station in disbelief as tears streamed down his face. It was enough to bring the mortgage current and cover several months of payments, with some left over for the medical expenses not covered by insurance. For the first time since Sarah's death, Jack allowed himself to believe that they might actually be okay. With the immediate financial pressure relieved, Jack was able to focus on his daughter's recovery. Lily was discharged after 9 days, her exuberant spirit dimmed only slightly by the ordeal. Emma's recovery was slower, requiring 2 additional weeks of hospitalization and the beginning of physical therapy for her damaged nerve endings. But the doctors were increasingly optimistic about her prognosis. Jack split his time between the hospital, work, and caring for Lily at home. The community continued to rally around them, with neighbors taking turns watching Lily when Jack needed to work, bringing home-cooked meals, and even organizing a volunteer crew to tackle some long-overdue repairs on the house. By the time Emma was finally discharged, the worst of winter had released its grip on Lakeland. The first tentative signs of spring were appearing, crocuses pushing through the melting snow, daylight stretching a little longer each evening. Emma's homecoming should have been purely joyous, but Jack couldn't help noticing her withdrawal. Once outgoing and confident, she had become quiet and anxious, especially around water. Even bath time had become a struggle, triggering panic and tears. It's a normal reaction to trauma, Dr. Stevens, the pediatric psychologist, assured Jack. During their follow-up visit, both girls may exhibit some post-traumatic stress, but Emma's was compounded by her longer hospitalization and physical pain. I'm recommending weekly therapy sessions for both of them. Jack nodded, adding another item to the mental list of expenses. The donations had been generous, but they wouldn't last forever, and specialized therapy wasn't fully covered by their insurance. As they left the hospital, Emma tugged on his hand. "Daddy, are we going to have to move away from our house?" Jack crouched down to her level, surprised by the question. "No, sweetheart. Why would you think that?" "I heard you talking to Uncle Marcus about money problems," she said, her eyes wide with worry. "And Lily told me you were sad about the bank taking our house." Jack mentally kicked himself for not being more careful about their conversations. Around the girls. "We had some money problems, but we're okay now. Lots of kind people have helped us. We're not going to lose our house. At least not immediately," he added silently. "But what about when the money runs out?" Emma persisted, displaying the perceptiveness that often surprised him. "Will we have to leave then?" Jack hesitated, torn between reassurance and honesty. "I'm working very hard to make sure that doesn't happen. And you know what? Sometimes things work out in ways we never expect." He had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. 3 days after Emma's return home, Jack was replacing a broken window pane, one of the many maintenance tasks that had been neglected during their financial struggles. The girls were inside, working on an art project under the watchful eye of Mrs. Abernathy, their elderly neighbor, who had volunteered to help a few hours each day while Jack caught up on work. The distant sound of vehicles approaching caught his attention. Looking up, he was stunned to see a line of black SUVs turning onto their quiet street. 10 identical vehicles, Their tinted windows, reflecting the afternoon sun, moved in perfect formation before coming to a synchronized stop directly in front of his house. Jack set down his tools slowly, anxiety rising in his chest. In his experience, nothing good ever arrived in a fleet of black SUVs. Government agencies, debt collectors, corporate lawyers, none would bring welcome news to a struggling single father. The doors of the lead vehicle opened, and a woman stepped out. She was in her early 40s, impeccably dressed in a navy pantsuit, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She surveyed the modest house with an unreadable expression before her eyes settled on Jack. From the second vehicle emerged a tall man in an expensive suit, followed by what appeared to be a security detail. The remaining SUVs disgorged a mix of well-dressed individuals carrying briefcases and tablets, and others with professional camera equipment. Jack stood frozen on his front lawn, hammer still in hand, as the woman approached him with purposeful strides. "Mr. Mitchell," she inquired, extending her hand. "My name is Alexandra Ward. I represent the Callaway Foundation. May we speak with you about something important?" Behind her, the impressive entourage waited, while neighbors began to emerge from their homes, curiosity drawing them to the unprecedented spectacle unfolding on their unremarkable street. Jack shook her hand automatically, his mind racing. "The Callaway Foundation? Robert Callaway's philanthropic organization," she explained. "I believe you may have heard of him." Everyone had heard of Robert Callaway, the tech billionaire whose innovative medical devices had revolutionized healthcare while amassing him a fortune that rivaled the GDP of small nations. The foundation bearing his name was known for grand, humanitarian gestures and targeted interventions in cases that captured public attention. "I don't understand," Jack said, still gripping the hammer like a lifeline. "Why would the Callaway Foundation be interested in me?" Alexandra Ward's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Mr. Callaway saw your interview with Melanie Cooper. Your story resonated with him personally. He sent us here today with what he calls a correction of fortune." The man from the second vehicle stepped forward, extending his hand to Jack. "Frank Reynolds, Chief Counsel for the Foundation. What Ms. Ward is trying to say is that Mr. Callaway was moved by your sacrifice and your current situation. He believes your daughters deserve every opportunity for recovery and success, and that you deserve recognition for your heroism." Jack's confusion must have been evident because Frank Reynolds smiled and motioned toward the house. "Perhaps we could go inside? What we have to discuss is rather substantial, and I imagine you'd prefer privacy for this conversation." As Jack led the two representatives into his modest home, the rest of the entourage remained on the lawn, setting up equipment as curious neighbors gathered at the edges of the property. Whatever was about to happen, it was clear that Jack Mitchell's life was about to change dramatically. What he couldn't possibly know was just how complete that transformation would be, or how many lives beyond his own family would be touched by what was about to unfold on this ordinary spring afternoon. Jack Mitchell's living room had never felt smaller than it did with Alexandra Ward and Frank Reynolds seated on his worn sofa. The coffee table between them held a leather portfolio that Reynolds had placed there with ceremonial precision, but had yet to open. Through the window, Jack could see the activity on his front lawn. Camera equipment being assembled, neighbors gathering in curious clusters, and the imposing line of black SUVs parked along the curb. "Mr. Mitchell," Alexandra began, "before we discuss the Foundation's proposal, there's something you should know about Robert Callaway's personal interest in your situation." She folded her hands in her lap, her expression softening from professional to genuinely compassionate. 35 years ago, Mr. Callaway's younger sister fell through the ice on a pond behind their childhood home in Vermont. Their father attempted a rescue, but suffered a fatal heart attack in the process. His sister survived, but Mr. Callaway lost his father that day. Jack felt a chill run through him that had nothing to do with the lingering effects of his hypothermia. "I'm sorry to hear that. When he saw your story," Alexandra continued, "it affected him deeply. He recognized in you the same selfless courage his father showed. But unlike his family's tragedy, your story has the potential for a different ending." Frank Reynolds finally opened the portfolio, removing a document bound in a blue cover. "The Callaway Foundation would like to establish a trust for your daughters, Emma and Lily, to cover all their educational expenses through graduate school, should they choose to pursue higher education." Jack blinked, certain he'd misheard. "A trust?" "For college." "Not just college," Reynolds clarified. "The trust would cover private schooling beginning immediately if you wish, as well as any specialized education, tutoring, academic enrichment programs, and eventually undergraduate and graduate studies at the institutions of their choice. The trust is valued at $2 million. The room seemed to tilt around Jack. $2 million. It was an incomprehensible sum to a man who had been counting pennies to buy groceries just weeks earlier. "Additionally," Alexandra continued, as if they hadn't just dropped a bombshell, "the foundation would like to establish a separate medical trust of $1 million to cover all treatments related to the girl's recovery, physical therapy, psychological counseling, any specialized care they may need. This would include experimental treatments, if necessary, that might not be covered by conventional insurance." Jack opened his mouth, but no words came out. His head was spinning. "There's more," Reynolds said, pulling out another document. "Mr. Callaway was particularly moved by your efforts to save your home. The foundation would like to pay off your existing mortgage in full and establish a maintenance fund to cover property taxes, insurance, and major repairs for the next 15 years. Alexandra leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Mitchell, we understand this is overwhelming. Please know that there are no strings attached to this assistance. Mr. Callaway simply wishes to ensure that you can focus on your daughter's recovery without the burden of financial hardship." Jack ran a hand over his face, struggling to process what he was hearing. I don't even know what to say. Why would he do all this for us? We're nobody to him." "On the contrary," Reynolds said, "you represent something Mr. Callaway values deeply, selfless courage and parental devotion. He believes that such qualities should be recognized and rewarded, particularly when they've come at such personal cost. There is one more thing," Alexandra added, casting a glance toward the window where the camera equipment was now fully assembled. "Mr. Callaway would like to use your story, with your permission, as part of the Foundation's new initiative, the Second Chance Fund, designed to assist families facing catastrophic circumstances through no fault of their own." Jack followed her gaze to the activity outside. "The cameras are here to document the moment, if you consent," she confirmed. "Your story has already touched thousands of people through the local news coverage. Mr. Callaway believes it could inspire millions more and generate support for other families in similar situations." A soft noise from the hallway caught Jack's attention. Emma and Lily stood in the doorway, their curious faces peering into the room. Mrs. Abernathy hovered behind them, her expression apologetic. "I'm sorry, Jack," she said. "They heard voices and wanted to see what was happening." Emma's eyes widened at the sight of the strangers, her small hand clutching her sister's. The physical differences between the twins were more pronounced now. Emma's recovery had left her thinner, her movements more cautious, while Lily remained the picture of resilient childhood. "Daddy, why are there so many cars outside?" Lily asked, pointing toward the window. Jack beckoned his daughters into the room. "These people are from a foundation that wants to help us," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "They're going to make sure we can keep our house and that you both get the best care and education possible." "Really?" Emma asked, her voice small but hopeful, the first sign of her old spirit Jack had seen since the accident. Alexandra smiled warmly at the girls. Really? Your father did something extraordinary when he saved you, and we want to make sure all three of you have every opportunity to thrive. Is it because Daddy's a hero? Lily asked, slipping her hand into Jack's with uncomplicated confidence. Exactly, Reynolds confirmed, his professional demeanor softening in the presence of the children. Your father is indeed a hero. Jack swallowed the lump in his throat, looking from his daughters to the Foundation representatives. I don't know how to thank Mr. Calloway for this. It's beyond anything I could have imagined. There is one way, Alexandra said. Mr. Calloway would like to speak with you directly. He's on a video call, waiting to talk with you and the girls if you're willing. With a nod from Jack, Reynolds produced a tablet from his briefcase and set it up on the coffee table. After a few taps, the screen flickered to life, revealing the face of Robert Calloway, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the country. Despite his billions, Calloway had a remarkably approachable appearance. A man in his early 60s with salt and pepper hair, intelligent eyes behind rimless glasses, and a face creased by both laughter and loss. He smiled warmly when he saw Jack and the twins. Mr. Mitchell, he said, his voice carrying the slight accent of his New England origins. It's an honor to meet you and your remarkable daughters. Mr. Calloway, Jack replied, still trying to wrap his mind around the surreal situation. I don't even know where to begin. What your foundation is offering, it's life-changing. It's the least we can do, Calloway said simply. When I saw your interview, I recognized something in you that's become far too rare in this world. Genuine selflessness. You didn't hesitate to risk everything for your children, just as my father didn't hesitate for my sister. He paused, his expression momentarily distant. The difference is, you survived. You have the chance to watch your daughters grow up, to see the women they'll become. I'd like to help ensure that future is as bright as possible. Emma, who had been studying Calloway's face with intense concentration, suddenly spoke up. Daddy jumped in cold water too. Calloway's expression softened further. Yes, he did, to save my sister, just like your daddy saved you and Lily. Was he scared? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I think he probably was, Calloway answered gently. But sometimes being brave means doing something even when you're scared, because it's the right thing to do. Emma nodded solemnly, as if this confirmation of adult fear was somehow reassuring. I was really scared under the water, but then Daddy came, and I knew it would be okay. Jack pulled his daughter close, his heart constricting at the simple faith in her words. Faith he had nearly failed to live up to. Ms. Ward and Mr. Reynolds have explained our offer, Calloway continued, addressing Jack again. But there's one aspect they haven't discussed yet, because I wanted to propose it personally. Jack raised his eyebrows, unable to imagine what more could be added to the already overwhelming generosity. I understand you run your own electrical business, Calloway said, one that's struggled since your wife's passing. Jack nodded, a flicker of his old pride surfacing. Mitchell Electric. It was doing well before Sarah got sick, but I had to scale back to care for her. And then the girls. My foundation is in the process of establishing a trade school scholarship program for disadvantaged youth, Calloway explained. We need local businesses to provide apprenticeships and practical training. I'd like to offer you a contract to expand Mitchell Electric, hire additional staff, and partner with our program. The foundation would provide the necessary capital and guaranteed work for the first 3 years. Jack stared at the screen in disbelief. This wasn't just charity, it was an opportunity to rebuild his business, to create something sustainable that would support his family long after the initial assistance faded. Why? He found himself asking again. Why do all this for us? Calloway was quiet for a moment. When my father died, our family fell apart. My mother struggled with grief and financial pressures. My sister never fully recovered from the trauma and the guilt. I was sent to live with relatives while she received treatment. We lost not just our father, but our home, our sense of security, our family unit. He leaned closer to the camera, his expression earnest. I have the means to prevent that from happening to your family, and in doing so, perhaps I can honor my father's memory in a way that brings healing rather than more loss. Will you allow me to do that, Mr. Mitchell? Jack looked at his daughters, Emma with her cautious hope, Lily with her unshakable faith in happy endings, and felt something shift inside him. The stubborn pride that had initially resisted help now gave way to a deeper understanding. Sometimes the bravest thing a parent could do was accept the help needed to secure their children's future. Yes, he said simply, and thank you doesn't. Begin to cover it, Calloway smiled. Then let's make it official. With Jack's consent, the camera crew was invited inside to document the moment. As Reynolds guided him through signing the necessary paperwork, Alexandra explained that the Foundation would issue a press release the following day, announcing both the Mitchell family grants and the larger Second Chance Fund initiative. Your story will help us raise awareness and funding to assist other families in crisis, she explained. The goal is to create a sustainable program that can identify and support those who have fallen through the cracks of conventional assistance. By late afternoon, the paperwork was complete. The camera crew had captured what they needed, and the imposing fleet of black SUVs prepared to depart. Before leaving, Alexandra handed Jack a business card with her direct number. The Foundation's financial advisors will be in touch tomorrow to establish the trusts and set up accounts for immediate expenses, she said. In the meantime, if you or the girls need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call me. As the last vehicle pulled away, Jack stood on his front porch with Emma and Lily beside him, watching the parade of black SUVs disappear down the quiet suburban street. The neighbors who had gathered to witness the spectacle approached cautiously, curious about what had transpired. Dad? Emma tugged at his hand. Does this mean I can keep going to art therapy? Dr. Stevens said it would help with the bad dreams, but I heard you telling Uncle Marcus it was too expensive. Jack crouched down to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Yes, sweetheart, you can have all the art therapy you need, and we can get those special colored pencils you've been wanting too. Emma's face lit up with the first genuine smile he'd seen since before the accident. Can I get the 64 pack with the gold and silver ones? Absolutely, Jack promised, his heart swelling at her excitement over something so simple, something that would have been financially out of reach just hours earlier. Lily, never one to be outdone, bounced on her toes. Can I get new ice skates? Purple ones. Jack hesitated, a flash of fear cutting through his joy. The thought of his daughters returning to the ice sent a wave of panic through him. But he forced himself to take a deep breath. They couldn't live in fear, couldn't let one traumatic day define their relationship with winter and water forever. Yes, he said, making a decision. But we'll need to take lessons at the indoor rink first with proper supervision. All three of us. You too, Daddy. Lily giggled at the idea of her father on skates. Me too, Jack confirmed. We'll learn together how to be safe on the ice. That evening, after the girls were tucked into bed, Jack sat alone on the front porch. Swing that had been Sarah's favorite spot. The spring air carried the scent of new growth, of possibilities. He held the folder containing copies of all the documents he'd signed, physical proof that the day's events hadn't been some elaborate dream. You wouldn't believe what happened today, Sarah, he whispered to the night sky, continuing the one-sided conversations that had become his way of keeping her memory alive. The girls are going to be okay, better than okay. He could almost hear her response, something practical yet warm, something that would ground him while acknowledging the wonder of it all. Sarah had always been his ballast, keeping him steady through life's turbulent waters. I know what you'd say, he continued softly, that we were due for some good luck, that everything happens for a reason. He paused, emotion tightening his throat. But I still wish you were here to see it. The port swing creaked gently as he rocked, his mind trying to process the complete reversal of their circumstances. Just yesterday, he had been calculating how many extra jobs he would need to take on to afford Emma's therapy. Now, he was trying to comprehend being the recipient of a multi-million-dollar trust fund. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had jumped into a frozen lake without hesitation to save his daughters, willing to sacrifice everything without a second thought. Yet, accepting help, acknowledging that he couldn't do everything alone, had been so much harder. Perhaps that was the real miracle, Jack reflected, not just the financial rescue that had arrived in those black SUVs, but the deeper understanding that sometimes the most courageous thing a person could do was to let others help carry the burden. 6 months later, the Mitchell family returned to Cedar Lake for the first time since the accident. The summer sun sparkled on the water that had nearly claimed Emma and Lily's lives, transforming it from a place of terror to one of serene beauty. Jack watched from the shore as his daughters waded cautiously in the shallow water, life jackets securely fastened despite the warmth of the day. Emma still approached the lake with trepidation, but her determination to overcome her fear was evident in every careful step. Lily, as always, moved with more confidence, though she stayed close to her sister, their hands linked in unconscious solidarity. Behind them, the new Mitchell electric van was parked in the lot, the first of 3 vehicles purchased for the expanding business. Jack had hired 4 new employees, including 2 apprentices from the Callaway Foundation's trade school program. The company was booked solid for months ahead, with contracts ranging from residential wiring to commercial projects that would have been beyond his reach a year ago. The twins would be starting at Lakeside Academy in the fall, a prestigious private school with an exceptional arts program for Emma and strong science curriculum for Lily, who had recently developed an interest in marine biology, inspired perhaps by her own experience with water. As Jack watched his daughters slowly rebuilding their relationship with the lake, he noticed a familiar figure approaching along the shore. Melanie Cooper, the reporter whose interview had caught Robert Callaway's attention, waved as she spotted him. "I thought I might find you here," she said, joining him on the wooden bench overlooking the water. "Full circle, huh?" Jack nodded, his eyes never leaving his daughters. "Seems fitting somehow, facing the fear head-on. The Foundation asked me to do a follow-up piece," Melanie explained, "a 6 months later human interest story. Would you be open to that?" "As long as it helps the Second Chance Fund," Jack agreed. "I hear they've helped 12 families already. 15, actually," Melanie corrected, "including a single mother in Oregon whose son needed experimental cancer treatment, and a family in Florida who lost everything in a hurricane." Jack smiled, a deep sense of satisfaction washing over him. His family's story had transcended their personal experience, creating ripples of positive change that continued to spread outward. "Did I tell you that Callaway is flying us out to Vermont next month?" he said. "He wants the girls to meet his sister. Apparently, she's finally ready to talk about what happened all those years ago. He thinks it might help Emma with her recovery, to hear from someone who's been through the same thing." "That's incredible," Melanie said. "Mind if I include that in the follow-up?" "Not at all," Jack replied. "People should know that healing comes in all forms, not just financial." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching Emma and Lily gradually venture deeper into the water, their initial fear giving way to tentative joy as they splashed each other. "You know," Melanie finally said, "when I first interviewed you, you told me you weren't special, that any parent would have done what you did. Do you still believe that? Jack considered the question carefully. I believe that love makes us capable of extraordinary things. What happened afterward, the community support, the foundation's help, that was the real miracle. Not what I did, but what everyone else did in response. He watched as Emma, finding a moment of courage, dipped completely under the water for the first time since the accident, emerging with a triumphant grin that lit up her entire face. Lily cheered and hugged her sister, their laughter carrying across the lake. That, Jack said, pointing to his daughter's celebration, is the miracle, not the money or the opportunities or the new business. Just them, living and growing and overcoming. Everything else is just the means to that end. As if sensing they were being discussed, the twins turned toward shore, waving enthusiastically at their father. "Daddy, come in," Lily called. "Emma went all the way under." "I wasn't even scared," Emma added proudly. Jack stood, slipping off his shoes. "That's my cue," he said to Melanie with a smile. As he waded into the water to join his daughters, Jack reflected that life, like the lake itself, contained both danger and beauty, terror and joy. The frozen surface that had nearly taken everything from him had transformed into a sun-dappled pathway to healing. The black SUVs that had arrived on his street that spring day had indeed delivered a miracle, not just in the tangible assistance they brought, but in the intangible gift of second chances and new beginnings. A chance for a father and his daughters to not just survive, but to thrive, carried forward on waves of compassion that began with one desperate plunge through the ice and continued to ripple outward, touching life after life with the simple power of human kindness. 2 years had passed since the day Jack Mitchell plunged into the frozen waters of Cedar Lake. The calendar now showed early September, and the Mitchell household buzzed with the familiar chaos of a school morning. "Emma, your art portfolio is by the door," Jack called up the stairs, simultaneously flipping pancakes and checking his phone for work messages. Mitchell Electric had grown to 15 employees, with a fleet of 5 service vans bearing the company's new logo. A stylized lightning bolt inside a shield, designed by Emma during one of her art therapy sessions. "Dad, have you seen my science?" "E-project notes," Lily shouted from somewhere upstairs, her voice tinged with the mild panic of a 10-year-old convinced that missing homework would end her academic career. "Check the blue folder in your backpack," Jack replied, sliding the last pancake onto a plate. 5 minutes until we need to leave for Lakeside. The transformation of their lives extended beyond finances. Jack had evolved from a desperate single father drowning in grief and debt to the founder and CEO of Mitchell Electric and Technical Services, which now specialized in energy-efficient systems for commercial buildings. The company had become the primary training partner for the Callaway Foundation's Trade School initiative, providing apprenticeships to disadvantaged youth and second-career adults. Emma appeared in the kitchen, her long hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, art portfolio clutched under one arm. At 10, she retained the quieter demeanor that had characterized her since the accident, but her confidence had grown enormously, particularly when it came to her artistic talents. The specialized therapy provided by the medical trust had worked wonders, and while she still bore some scars, both physical and emotional, from her ordeal, she had transformed them into fuel for her creative expression. "Is Miss Abernathy coming over tonight?" Emma asked, grabbing a pancake and folding it into a makeshift pancake taco. "Use a plate, please," Jack reminded her with a smile. "And yes, she'll be here at 6. I have the foundation board meeting until about 9. Jack had joined the Callaway Foundation's board of directors the previous year, bringing his unique perspective as both a recipient and now a provider of the foundation's services. His insights into the practical needs of families in crisis had proven invaluable in shaping the Second Chance Fund's expansion. Lily bounded into the kitchen, her energy a stark contrast to her twins' more measured movements. "Found them," she announced triumphantly, waving a folder. "Mrs. Peterson is going to love my presentation on lake ecosystems." Jack smiled at the irony. While Emma had processed her trauma through art, Lily had channeled hers into fascination with the very environment that had nearly claimed her life. Her bedroom now resembled a miniature aquatic research center, complete with water testing kits and detailed journals documenting the seasonal changes in Cedar Lake. "Eat something before we go," Jack urged, pushing a plate toward her. "Big day today, right?" Both girls nodded. It was the first day of 5th grade at Lakeside Academy, the prestigious private school they had now attended for 2 years. But more significantly, it was the day Robert Calloway would be visiting the school to announce the expansion of his educational initiative, with the Mitchell twins as the program's poster children. Mr. Calloway said, "I could show him my portfolio," Emma said quietly, a hint of pride coloring her voice. "And my science journal," Lily added, not to be outdone. "He said he might introduce me to Dr. Winters, you know, the lake ecologist who works at the university." Jack glanced at his watch. "Speaking of Mr. Calloway, we don't want to be late. Finish up and let's get moving." The drive to Lakeside Academy took them through neighborhoods that had once seemed worlds apart from their own modest existence. Jack still marveled sometimes at how seamlessly his daughters had adapted to their new circumstances, neither becoming entitled nor forgetting where they came from. Much of that balanced perspective, he knew, came from his own efforts to keep them grounded. Despite the trust funds and educational opportunities, he had insisted on maintaining certain family traditions: Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday afternoon volunteering at the community center, and modest birthday celebrations that focused on experiences rather than extravagant gifts. "Dad," Emma's voice pulled him from his thoughts as they approached the school's impressive entrance. "Do you think Mum would be proud of us?" The question caught Jack off guard. Sarah's memory remained a constant presence in their home. Her photos still occupied prominent places, and they still talked about her regularly, but Emma rarely initiated these conversations. "Every single day," Jack answered, his voice thick with emotion. "She'd be bursting with pride to see the amazing young women you're becoming." Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied. "I was thinking about her this morning. I'm going to add her portrait to my portfolio." Lily reached across the back seat to squeeze her sister's hand. "That's perfect, Em. Mr. Calloway will love it." As they pulled into the school's circular driveway, Jack noticed the increased security presence and media vans parked along the perimeter. Robert Calloway's visits anywhere were noteworthy events, attracting both press coverage and enhanced security protocols. "Remember," Jack said as he parked, "after the assembly you'll both go to your regular classes. Mr. Calloway and I have meetings all afternoon, and then the 3 of us will have dinner with him at the Riverside Hotel before he flies back to Vermont." "I remember," Lily said, already gathering her things. "Will his sister be there again? I liked her." "Not this time," Jack replied. "Amanda is presenting at a conference in Europe. But she sent you both books. They're wrapped on the dining room table for when we get home." Amanda Calloway had become an unexpected constant in the twins' lives. As a fellow survivor of a childhood ice accident, she had formed a special bond with Emma and Lily, becoming something of an honorary aunt. Her own journey through trauma and recovery provided a roadmap that had proven invaluable, particularly for Emma. The school's grand reception hall was already filling with students, parents, and media representatives when the Mitchells arrived. Principal Harrington, a dignified woman in her 60s, with a reputation for running the prestigious academy with both warmth and unwavering standards, immediately approached them. "The guests of honor have arrived," she said warmly, ushering the family toward the front of the hall. "Mr. Calloway is already backstage and asked specifically that you join him before the assembly, Jack." Jack knelt to his daughter's level. "You two know where to sit, right? With Mrs. Thomas and your classmates?" Emma and Lily nodded, accustomed to the protocol of these foundation events. They had become poised young ambassadors, comfortable with the periodic media attention there. Story still generated. "Good luck, Dad," Emma said, giving him a quick hug. "Tell Mr. Calloway I finished that ecosystem model," Lily added. "I want to show him after the assembly." Jack watched as his daughters made their way to their designated seats, greeted enthusiastically by classmates and teachers alike. The social integration he had worried about when they first enrolled at Lakeside had proven unfounded. Both girls had found their niches and formed solid friendships. Backstage, Robert Calloway was reviewing his notes with Alexandra Ward, who had been promoted to executive director of the Second Chance Fund following its remarkable success. Though now in his mid-60s, Calloway maintained the vigorous presence and sharp intellect that had built his tech empire. "Jack," he greeted, extending his hand. "Right on time. I was just discussing the new scholarship numbers with Alex. We've exceeded our projections for the third quarter. The Mitchell Electric Apprenticeship Program helped push us over the top," Alexandra added. "Your successful graduates are our best advertisement." Jack nodded, still somewhat uncomfortable with the praise his efforts routinely garnered. The real credit goes to the apprentices themselves. Their determination to rebuild their lives is what makes the program work. "And that," Calloway said, clapping him on the shoulder, "is exactly why you're the perfect person to lead the next phase of the initiative." Jack raised his eyebrows. "Next phase?" Calloway exchanged a glance with Alexandra. "I was going to wait until our dinner tonight to discuss this, but since you're here, we want to expand the trade school program nationally, 10 cities in the next 3 years, with the Mitchell model as the template." "The Mitchell model?" Jack repeated, genuinely surprised. "Your approach, combining technical training with life skills and ongoing mentorship, has yielded a 92% success rate," Alexandra explained. "That's unprecedented in workforce development programs, particularly for at-risk populations." Calloway picked up his tablet, scrolling to a document. "We're prepared to commit $50 million to the expansion, with you as the national program director. It would mean reducing your hands-on role at Mitchell Electric, but you've built a solid management team there. They're ready for you to step back." Jack stared at both of them, momentarily speechless. The trajectory of his life continued to astonish him, from the brink of losing everything to being offered leadership of a multi-million-dollar national initiative. "I'll need to think about it," he finally said. "Talk to the girls. It's still just the 3 of us, and they need stability." "Of course," Calloway nodded. "This would be a gradual transition over 6 to 8 months. And you'd be based here, in Lakeland, no relocation necessary, just some travel to the program sites." Before Jack could respond further, Principal Harrington appeared to inform them that the assembly was ready to begin. The conversation would have to continue later. The announcement of the expanded educational initiative was met with enthusiastic applause from the assembled students, parents, and media. As planned, Emma and Lily were called to the stage to be recognized as the program's first beneficiaries, their poise and articulate responses to Calloway's questions drawing appreciative murmurs from the audience. "These extraordinary young women," Calloway said, his hand on Lily's shoulder, "represent the future we envision. One where circumstance and tragedy don't determine destiny, where potential can be fulfilled regardless of background or hardship." As Jack watched from the side of the stage, a profound sense of gratitude washed over him. The journey from that frigid January morning to this moment had been transformative in ways he could never have imagined. The desperate father who had plunged into the frozen lake, certain he was about to lose everything, could never have envisioned the chain of events that would unfold from that single act of courage. The remainder of the school day proceeded normally. For Emma and Lily, while Jack accompanied Calloway to meetings with local business leaders interested in supporting the expanded initiative. By late afternoon, They had secured additional commitments that would allow the program to establish scholarships for 50 more students in the coming year. "Your story still resonates powerfully," Calloway observed as they left the final meeting. 2 years later, and it continues to open doors and hearts, Jack nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately. How random it all seems. If you hadn't seen that particular news segment, if Melanie Cooper hadn't convinced me to do the interview." "I don't believe it was random at all," Calloway replied, his expression serious. "I believe some events are catalysts that reveal character and create opportunities for meaningful change. What happened at Cedar Lake was tragic, but your response to it created ripples that continue to transform lives." Those ripples had indeed spread far beyond the Mitchell family. The Second Chance Fund had now assisted over 200 families across the country, providing targeted interventions that allowed them to rebuild after catastrophic events. Mitchell Electric had trained 37 apprentices, 32 of whom were now employed in stable, well-paying positions. Lakeside Academy had established a dedicated scholarship program for children affected by trauma, inspired by Emma and Lily's success. That evening, the dinner with Calloway at the Riverside Hotel turned into an impromptu celebration when John Parker, the first graduate of the Mitchell Apprenticeship Program, stopped by their table to share his news. The formerly homeless veteran had just purchased his first home, a modest 2-bedroom house not far from where the Mitchells had lived before their lives changed. "I never thought I'd have a roof that's actually mine," John told them, his weathered face alight with pride. "My granddaughters are coming to stay with me next weekend, first time I've been stable enough to have them visit." After John departed, Lily looked thoughtfully at her dessert. "Dad, do you think we could help Mr. Parker's granddaughters like Mr. Calloway helped us? Maybe they could come to Lakeside too?" The question caught Jack by surprise. "That's really thoughtful, Lily. We could certainly look into scholarship options if that's something they'd be interested in." Emma nodded agreement. "We could use some of our trust money, right? Like how you taught us about giving back." Jack exchanged a glance with Calloway, who was watching the exchange with evident approval. "Actually," Jack said, "that gives me an idea. What if we established a student-led scholarship fund at Lakeside? You and your classmates could help identify candidates and be involved in the selection process." "A peer-to-peer scholarship," Calloway mused. "I like it. Learning philanthropy by doing it, not just receiving it." The twins' enthusiasm for the concept was immediate and infectious. By the time dessert arrived, they had already begun planning how to present the idea to their classmates and teachers. Later that night, after Calloway had departed for the airport and the girls were asleep, Jack sat on the back deck of their home. Not the modest house they had nearly lost, but a larger one on the outskirts of town, with space for his daughters to grow and pursue their interests. The property backed onto a protected woodland, and the sound of an owl hooting in the distance provided a peaceful soundtrack to his thoughts. The offer to lead the national expansion weighed on his mind. It represented a natural evolution of his involvement with the foundation, but it would also mean less time at Mitchell Electric, the business he had built from nothing, lost, and then rebuilt beyond his wildest expectations. A soft noise behind him announced Emma's presence. She was in her pajamas, a sketchbook clutched to her chest. "Can't sleep?" Jack asked, making room for her on the porch swing. She shook her head, settling beside him. "I was thinking about what Mr. Calloway said today, about Mom being part of our story even though she's gone." "What about it?" Jack prompted gently. Emma opened her sketchbook, revealing a drawing of a woman with familiar features standing beside a frozen lake, her arms outstretched toward 2 small figures in the water. Though Emma had been only 6 when Sarah died, she had captured her mother's essence with remarkable accuracy. "I think Mom was there that day," Emma said quietly. Not really there, but helping somehow. That's why you were able to find us under the ice. Why were you strong enough to get us out? Jack studied the drawing, emotion tightening his throat. The concept of Sarah's spiritual presence guiding him that day was one he had contemplated himself during countless nights of reflection. I think she's always with us, he finally said, in the way we remember her, in the values she taught us, in the love she gave us that we still carry. Emma nodded, tracing her finger over the drawn figure. Then I think she'd want you to take Mr. Calloway's offer, to help other families like he helped us. Jack looked at his daughter in surprise. You heard about that? Lily and I both did, Emma admitted. We weren't exactly eavesdropping, but we were right there when he mentioned it before the assembly. And you think I should accept? Mitchell Electric is doing great, and you have all those good people working there now. But the foundation thing, helping other kids who've had bad stuff happen, that seems more important. More like what Mom would want you to do. Jack put his arm around Emma's shoulders, marveling at the wisdom that sometimes emerged from his children. When did you get so grown up? Emma leaned against him, the way she had as a younger child. Probably somewhere between falling through the ice and everything that happened after. The simple statement held profound truth. Their family's journey had accelerated the twins' maturation in ways both challenging and beautiful. They understood concepts of loss, resilience, and gratitude at levels most adults struggled to grasp. I'll think about it, Jack promised. Get some input from Lily too before I decide. Emma closed her sketchbook and stood. She'll say the same thing. We already talked about it. As his daughter disappeared back into the house, Jack returned his gaze to the star-filled sky. Perhaps Emma was right. Perhaps Sarah's influence had been present that desperate day at Cedar Lake, guiding his actions and lending him strength beyond his natural capacity. And perhaps that same influence continued to work through the ripples, created by their family's story, touching lives they would never know, creating possibilities that extended far beyond their immediate circle. The black SUVs that had arrived on their street 2 years ago had indeed delivered a miracle, not just in material assistance, but in the opportunity to transform personal tragedy into expansive purpose. From desperate father to community leader, from near-drowning victims to thriving, compassionate young women, their journey had become a testament to the power of courage, generosity, and the profound ways in which lives could intertwine to create meaning from misfortune. Jack Mitchell had once believed that jumping into a frozen lake for his daughters was the most significant action he would ever take. Now he understood that it had simply been the beginning, the first in a series of choices that would define not just his life, but countless others touched by the expanding circles of that single courageous moment. The miracle, he realized, wasn't just what had happened to them. It was what they were now empowered to do for others, and in that continuation of purpose, Sarah's legacy and his own would endure long after the memory of those 10 black SUVs had faded into family lore. 5 years after accepting Robert Calloway's offer to lead the national expansion of the Trade School Initiative, Jack Mitchell stood in the gleaming lobby of the newly completed Callaway Mitchell Technical Training Center in Detroit. The massive facility, the 7th such center to open across the country, represented the culmination of a vision that had evolved far beyond anything he could have imagined when he first pulled his daughters from the icy waters of Cedar Lake. Impressive, isn't it? Alexandra Ward appeared at his side, her tablet displaying the day's ribbon-cutting agenda. Now the Chief Operations Officer for the Callaway Foundation's Educational Division, she had been Jack's steadfast partner in expanding the program nationwide. Hard to believe this was an abandoned warehouse 18 months ago. Jack nodded, taking in the state-of-the-art facility with its soaring ceilings and walls adorned with murals painted by local artists. including a striking central piece designed by Emma, now 15. The painting depicted hands of various skin tones reaching upward through stylized waves, grasping tools that transformed into symbols of stability: houses, bridges, power lines. "This city needed this," Jack said, watching as the first group of students and their families began to arrive for the grand opening ceremony. Many came from Detroit's most challenged neighborhoods, young people and career changers for whom traditional educational paths had proven inaccessible or insufficient. The application numbers exceeded our projections by almost 40%, and the corporate partnership commitments are twice what we anticipated, Alexandra added. "Something about your personal involvement seems to inspire unusual generosity from the business community." Jack smiled but shook his head. "It's the model that sells itself. Businesses get skilled workers, communities get economic revitalization, and individuals get pathways to sustainable careers. Everyone wins." The Mitchell model, as it had come to be known in workforce development circles, had revolutionized vocational training by combining technical education with comprehensive support services, community integration, and guaranteed first job placements. The approach had yielded extraordinary results: a 94% completion rate and an 89% five-year career retention rate, numbers that had attracted attention from education experts nationally. "Dad!" Lily's voice echoed across the lobby as she weaved through the gathering crowd, her press badge bouncing against her Lakeside Academy blazer. Now in 10th grade, she had evolved from the exuberant child into a poised young woman with Sarah's analytical mind and Jack's determined spirit. The Detroit Free Press reporter wants a quote about why we chose this neighborhood specifically. What should I tell him? Jack smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. Lily had appointed herself unofficial media liaison for the event, fulfilling requirements for both her journalism elective and community service credits at Lakeside. Her fascination with science remained, but it had expanded to include communications and advocacy, particularly around environmental justice issues. "Tell him the truth," Jack suggested. "We wanted to be where the need was greatest and the potential impact most significant, and remind him about the partnership with the Watershed Restoration Project." Lily nodded, already typing notes on her phone. "Got it. Oh, and Emma just texted. She and the mural team are ready for the unveiling. Ms. Abernathy is with them in the community hall." Mrs. Abernathy, now in her 70s but still spry, had become the twins' surrogate grandmother, accompanying them on many of their travels for foundation events. Her living room walls were covered with Emma's artwork and news clippings of Lily's various achievements. "Where's Robert?" Jack asked Alexandra, checking his watch. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes, and the former tech magnate was unusually punctual. "His plane landed 20 minutes ago," Alexandra replied. "The Foundation helicopter is bringing him from the airport now. His sister Amanda is with him. She wanted to surprise the girls." The mention of Amanda Calloway brought a smile to Jack's face. Now in her 60s, Robert's sister had become an integral part of the Foundation's work, specializing in trauma recovery programs for children. The bond she had formed with Emma and Lily had deepened over the years, providing them with a maternal figure who uniquely understood their experience. The crowd in the lobby had swelled to nearly 500 people: students, family members, corporate partners, community leaders, and media representatives. Jack made his way toward the community hall, stopping frequently to shake hands and exchange greetings with local officials and program partners. This aspect of his role had initially been the most challenging: the public speaking, the networking, the constant visibility. Jack Mitchell, the solitary electrician who had once worked alone rewiring houses to make ends meet, had been thrust into a position that required him to become the face and voice of a national initiative. The transition had been uncomfortable, at times even painful, but the impact of the work made the personal discomfort worthwhile. The community hall was a vast, light-filled space that would serve as both a training area and community gathering place. Emma stood with her team of young artists, all students from Lakeside Academy's outreach program, beside the massive covered mural that occupied the hall's main wall. At 15, she had grown tall like her mother, her serious demeanor softened by an artist's observant eyes and expressive hands. "Everything ready?" Jack asked, giving his daughter a quick hug. Emma nodded, her usual quiet confidence evident in her posture. "We stayed up until 2, finishing the final section, but it's perfect now. Mr. Calloway is going to love it." The sound of helicopter blades thudding overhead announced Robert Calloway's arrival. Minutes later, the billionaire philanthropist entered through a side door, accompanied by his sister Amanda and a small security detail. Despite his 70 years, Calloway maintained a vigorous presence, though his hair had turned completely white, and he now walked with a slight limp, the result of a skiing accident the previous winter. Amanda had aged similarly well, her calm demeanor and compassionate eyes reflecting the wisdom gained through her own life's challenges. "Jack," Calloway called, extending his hand, "another masterpiece you've created here. The Detroit Center might be the most impressive yet." "We had amazing local partners," Jack deflected, though he couldn't help feeling pride in what they had accomplished. "Wait until you see what we've prepared for the ceremony. Emma has outdone herself." Amanda had already moved to embrace Emma, examining the covered mural with interest. "You've been very secretive about this project, young lady." "Not even a hint." "When we spoke last week," Emma smiled, one of her rare full smiles that transformed her serious face. "We wanted it to be a true surprise. It tells the whole story, from Cedar Lake to Detroit." Lily joined them, phone still in hand. "The auditorium is filled, and the mayor just arrived. They're ready for us whenever you are." The ribbon-cutting ceremony unfolded with the precision of events that had become routine for the foundation. Local officials praised the investment in their community. Corporate partners highlighted the economic benefits of the center, and students shared powerful testimonials about what the opportunity meant to them and their families. When it was Jack's turn to speak, he stepped to the podium and surveyed the audience, still somewhat amazed that life had brought him to this moment. 7 years ago, he began, I was a struggling single father about to lose my home, my business, and very nearly my daughters in a tragic accident. Today, I stand before you as the director of a national initiative that has already transformed the lives of over 3,000 individuals and their families. He paused, allowing the contrast to register with the audience. The path from there to here was neither direct nor easy. It required not just the extraordinary generosity of the Calloway Foundation, but the commitment of countless individuals who believed that circumstances shouldn't determine destiny, that tragedy could become opportunity, that purpose could emerge from pain. As Jack continued his address, Emma quietly slipped out a side door, gathering her artist team to prepare for the mural unveiling. Lily positioned herself near the stage, capturing video for the Foundation's archives and her own journalism portfolio. This center, Jack concluded, represents more than just a building or a program. It represents our collective belief that when we invest in people, when we see potential where others see only problems, the return on that investment ripples outward in ways we can never fully measure. Every life touched here will touch others, creating an expanding circle of positive change that will continue long after we're gone. The applause was enthusiastic, particularly from the new students and their families, for whom the center represented tangible hope for a better future. As Jack introduced Robert Calloway, he caught sight of Emma giving him a thumbs up from the side of the hall, their signal that the mural team was ready. Calloway's remarks were brief and powerful, focusing on the unique partnership that had evolved between his foundation and Jack's practical vision. Sometimes, he noted, the most effective philanthropy happens when we listen to those who have lived the challenges we seek to address. Jack Mitchell brought more than gratitude to our foundation. He brought insight, empathy, and practical wisdom that has transformed our approach to community investment. The ceremony culminated with the dramatic unveiling of Emma's mural. Dorkeen. The covering dropped away. An audible gasp rose from the audience, followed by spontaneous applause. The massive artwork told a story in visual form, beginning with a scene of a frozen lake, with a father pulling two small figures from broken ice, then transitioning through scenes of black SUVs, arriving at a modest home, children in a classroom, apprentices learning trades, families moving into new homes, and communities being rebuilt. The final section depicted a diverse group of graduates, tools in hand, standing before a cityscape transformed from decay to vitality. The ripple effect, Emma had titled it, with subtle wave patterns connecting each scene to the next, showing how a single action could expand outward in ever-widening circles of impact. Jack stood transfixed, seeing their family's journey rendered in such powerful visual form. The personal narrative had become universal. Their private struggle and subsequent blessing transformed into a message of hope that transcended their specific experience. Later, as the formal ceremonies gave way to tours and celebration, Jack found a quiet moment with his daughters and the Callaways in the center's administrative offices. "I don't know what to say, Emma," Robert said, still emotional from the mural unveiling. "You've captured everything we've been trying to accomplish, everything we believe about the power of targeted intervention and ongoing support." Emma, typically reserved about her work, accepted the praise with quiet dignity. "I wanted to show how it all connects, how saving two kids from a frozen lake could eventually help revitalize an entire city, how personal actions create public good." "Speaking of connections," Amanda interjected, "I have some news that relates directly to Emma's artistic talent. The National Gallery is organizing an exhibition of young artists addressing themes of resilience and recovery. They've requested that Emma submit work for consideration." Emma's eyes widened. "The National Gallery in Washington?" Amanda nodded, pleased by the reaction. "Their youth curator saw your mural design when Robert shared it last month. She was quite taken with your visual storytelling approach." As Emma processed this unexpected opportunity, Lily was quick to express her excitement. "Em, that's amazing! Your work in a national exhibition!" Jack watched the interaction with a full heart. The twins' relationship had evolved over the years, each finding their distinct paths while maintaining their deep connection. They celebrated each other's achievements without jealousy, understanding that their individual successes strengthened their shared journey. "There's more," Robert added, glancing at Jack. "The success of the first 7 centers has attracted additional funding. The board has approved expansion to 15 more cities over the next decade, with a parallel international pilot program in 3 countries. Jack raised his eyebrows. "International? That wasn't in the 5-year plan." "Plans evolve," Robert replied with a smile. "Just as your family's story has evolved far beyond that day at Cedar Lake. We've been approached by organizations in Canada, the UK, and South Africa, all interested in implementing the Mitchell model in their communities." The prospect was both exciting and daunting. Jack had already been traveling extensively to oversee the domestic centers. An international expansion would require even more time away from home and his daughters. As if reading his thoughts, Lily spoke up. "Dad, before you start worrying about being away more, Emma and I have been talking. We're 15 now, practically adults, and we have great support from Mrs. Abernathy, Uncle Marcus, and the Callaways. We want you to do this." "Actually," Emma added, We've been thinking that maybe we could be more involved too, especially during summer breaks. I could help design murals for the international centers, and Lily could document the expansion for the Foundation's media team. Jack looked at his daughters with a mixture of pride and amazement. The timid, traumatized children he had pulled from the frozen lake had grown into confident, compassionate young women with a deep understanding of privilege and responsibility. "We'll discuss it," he promised. "Any decisions about international expansion would need to work for all of us." As the conversation shifted to logistical details of the proposed expansion, Jack found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey their family had traveled, from the desperate plunge into icy waters to a global initiative that would touch thousands of lives. The path had been neither straight nor predictable, but it had led them to purpose beyond anything he could have imagined during those dark days after Sarah's death. The day concluded with a community dinner in the center's cafeteria where new students and their families mingled with corporate partners, foundation staff, and local officials. Jack watched as Emma and Lily moved comfortably through the diverse crowd, engaging equally with the daughter of a local factory worker and the CEO of a major automotive company. Robert Calloway joined him by the windows overlooking Detroit's skyline, now catching the golden light of sunset. "Remarkable young women you've raised, Jack. Sarah would be proud." "They've had extraordinary opportunities," Jack acknowledged, "but they've never forgotten where we started. That's what matters most to me, that they understand both the privilege they've received and the responsibility that comes with it." "The same could be said of you," Robert observed. "You could have simply accepted the Foundation's assistance and gone on with your life. Instead, you've dedicated yourself to creating opportunities for others." Jack smiled, watching as Lily demonstrated her phone's video capabilities to an elderly gentleman, while Emma sketched a quick portrait of a young girl who had been admiring the mural. "I think we all just followed the ripples where they led us. One action connecting to another, widening the circle with each new opportunity." Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the center stood quiet, Jack took a final walk through the building with his daughters. They stopped before Emma's mural, studying the visual narrative that connected their personal story to the broader mission that had emerged from it. "You know," Lily said thoughtfully, "if you hadn't jumped into that lake, none of this would exist. All these people we've helped, their lives would be completely different." "If I hadn't jumped in, you two wouldn't be here," Jack replied, putting an arm around each of his daughters. There was no choice to make that day. Emma leaned against her father's shoulder, her artist's eyes still evaluating her work. "But there were choices afterward, to accept help, to give back, to build something that would last beyond our own needs." "Those were the harder choices," Jack admitted. "Jumping in was instinct. Building all this, that took vision and commitment from all of us." As they stood together before the mural that told their story, Jack reflected on the miraculous journey that had begun with the most terrifying moment of his life. The black SUVs that had arrived on their street had indeed delivered a miracle, but the true wonder lay in what that miracle had made possible, not just for their family, but for countless others whose lives had been touched by the expanding circles of impact. From a desperate father's plunge into frozen waters had emerged a legacy of transformation, a testament to the extraordinary power of courage, compassion, and the belief that every life saved could in turn help save many more. The Mitchell family's story had become larger than themselves, a narrative of hope that would continue to inspire long after the memory of that frigid January day had faded into distant history. As they left the center that evening, Jack glanced back at the building that bore his name alongside Calloway's, a physical manifestation of how far they had come from the broken ice of Cedar Lake. The journey had been neither easy nor straightforward, but it had led them to purpose, to impact, and to a legacy that would ripple outward for generations to come. And in that knowledge, Jack Mitchell found a peace that transcended even the miracle of those 10 black SUVs and all that had followed in their wake. 10 years to the day after Jack Mitchell plunged into the frozen waters of Cedar Lake, a gathering took place on its shore. The winter sun glinted off the ice, transforming the once threatening surface into a canvas of diamond-like brilliance. Unlike that fateful January morning a decade earlier, today the lake was filled with people, skating, laughing, and celebrating. Jack stood near the shoreline, now in his late 40s, silver threads prominent in his dark hair, watching as hundreds of community members enjoyed the inaugural Cedar Lake Winter Festival. What had begun as a personal family trauma had, over time, transformed into a community celebration of resilience, second chances, and new beginnings. "Hard to believe it's been 10 years, said a familiar voice beside him. Jack turned to find Melanie Cooper, the reporter whose interview had caught Robert Calloway's attention and set their extraordinary journey in motion. Now the executive producer, for a national news network, she had returned to Lakeland to cover the 10th anniversary of the story that had launched her own career into the national spotlight. "Some days it feels like yesterday," Jack admitted. "Other days it feels like several lifetimes ago." They watched as Emma and Lily, now 20 years old, led a group of children through ice safety demonstrations near the shore. The twins had grown into remarkable young women, each pursuing her own path while remaining deeply connected to the Foundation's mission. Emma, in her second year at the Rhode Island School of Design, had already gained recognition for her public art installations, focused on themes of rescue and renewal. Her work had been featured in galleries across the country, including the exhibition at the National Gallery that Amanda Calloway had mentioned years earlier. Lily, studying environmental science and journalism at Northwestern University, had developed an award-winning documentary series about communities transformed through targeted intervention. Her first feature-length film, Ripple Effect, had premiered at the Sundance Film Festival the previous month. "When I interviewed you, that first time," Melanie said, "did you ever imagine all this would grow from that moment?" Jack shook his head, watching as Robert and Amanda Calloway joined the twins' demonstration. Robert, somewhat less steady on his feet at 80, but still commanding attention when he spoke. "I was just trying to keep my daughters alive and our home from foreclosure. Everything beyond that has been beyond imagination." The Mitchell-Calloway partnership had expanded far beyond the original vision. 15 technical training centers now operated across the United States, with international pilot programs successfully established in Toronto, Manchester, and Cape Town. The Mitchell model had been adopted by workforce development programs. Globally, its principles of comprehensive support and community integration transforming vocational education. "Dad," Lily called, waving him over, "we're ready for the dedication." Jack made his way across the snow-packed ground to the gathering crowd. At the center of attention stood a striking monument, a bronze sculpture created by Emma for her senior project. It depicted 3 figures emerging from stylized waves, reaching upward toward a star. The base bore a simple inscription: "For every life saved, countless others transformed," dedicated to second chances. The sculpture marked the spot where the twins had fallen through the ice a decade earlier, now transformed into a place of commemoration and celebration. Beside it stood a small building housing the headquarters of the Cedar Lake Safety Initiative, a program that had trained thousands of children and adults in ice and water safety over the years, preventing countless accidents across the region. As Jack joined his daughters and the Calloways for the dedication ceremony, he marveled at how completely life had come full circle. The lake that had nearly claimed Emma and Lily now served as both a cautionary tale and a symbol of rebirth. Friends and neighbors, Jack began, addressing the assembled crowd. 10 years ago today, this beautiful lake nearly took what was most precious to me. What followed that day has been described as miraculous. The intervention of the Callaway Foundation, the expansion of opportunities, the creation of programs that have touched thousands of lives. He paused, looking out over the faces of those gathered, neighbors who had supported them in their darkest hours, students who had graduated from the Foundation's programs, community leaders who had partnered in their initiatives. But the true miracle wasn't in the black SUVs that arrived at our home, or even in the generosity they represented. The miracle was in how that generosity sparked a chain reaction of positive change that continues to this day. From one act of desperate courage came countless acts of deliberate compassion. Emma stepped forward, her artist's eye still evaluating her sculpture even as she addressed the crowd. This monument isn't just about what happened to our family. It's about what can happen when people choose to help each other through their darkest moments, when they recognize that saving a life means saving all the potential that life holds. Lily joined her sister, the two standing shoulder to shoulder as they had so often throughout their journey. Every person here has their own Cedar Lake story, a moment when they needed rescue or when they reached out to rescue someone else. Those moments connect us, form the invisible threads of community that make progress possible. As the twins unveiled the sculpture together, a cheer rose from the crowd. Robert Callaway, now using a cane but still commanding in his presence, stepped forward to announce a new initiative, the Cedar Lake Legacy Fund, which would provide emergency assistance to families facing sudden catastrophic circumstances. These are first recipients, he announced, gesturing to a young couple standing nearby with twin toddlers, are the Anderson family, whose home was destroyed in last month's fire. They'll receive not just immediate assistance, but ongoing support to rebuild their lives and eventually pay forward the help they've received. The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause, particularly from those who remembered the community's initial response to the Mitchell family's crisis a decade earlier. The cycle of giving and gratitude had expanded beyond anyone's expectations. Following the ceremony, Jack found a quiet moment alone by the lake's edge. The festival continued around him, skaters gliding across the ice, food vendors serving hot chocolate and cider, children learning safety techniques from trained instructors. A familiar figure joined him, Mrs. Abernathy, now in her 80s but still remarkably spry, her eyes bright with the wisdom of years. "They've done you proud, those girls," she said, nodding toward Emma and Lily, who were now signing commemorative programs for a line of attendees. "I'm proud of them," Jack agreed. "But more importantly, I think they're proud of themselves. They've taken everything that happened, good and bad, and created meaning from it." Mrs. Abernathy nodded sagely. "That's the real gift, isn't it? Not the money or the opportunities, but the purpose that emerged from it all." As the winter day began to fade into early evening, lights illuminated the festival area, creating a magical atmosphere of celebration. Jack gathered with his daughters, the Callaways, and a small group of those who had been part of their journey from the beginning: Melanie Cooper, Alexandra Ward, Marcus Reynolds, and others whose lives had intertwined with theirs over the decade. "I propose a toast," Robert Callaway said, raising a cup of hot cider, "to 10 years of second chances." "To Sarah," Jack added softly, "who taught us the value of community long before we needed it." "To Cedar Lake," Emma continued, "for showing us that even the darkest moments can lead to light. And to the next 10 years, Lily concluded, of creating ripples that reach places we can't yet imagine." As they stood together under the winter stars, Jack Mitchell reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with the most desperate moment of his life, from a struggling father on the verge of losing everything to the architect of a model that had transformed thousands of lives. From twin girls fighting for survival in frozen waters to young women creating art and media that inspired others to action. The black SUVs that had arrived on their street a decade ago had indeed delivered a miracle, not as an endpoint, but as the beginning of a journey that continued to unfold in ways both surprising and profound. The ripples from that January day had expanded beyond anyone's imagination, touching lives across continents and generations. And in that expanding circle of impact, Jack Mitchell had found something more valuable than financial security or professional success. He had found purpose that transcended personal tragedy, meaning that grew from deepest loss, and legacy that would continue long after the memory of 10 black SUVs had faded into history. As the festival lights reflected on the frozen surface of Cedar Lake, Jack looked at his daughters, strong, compassionate, purposeful young women, and knew with absolute certainty that every moment of their extraordinary journey had been worth it. From the desperate plunge into icy waters to this moment of commemoration and celebration, their family's story had become part of something larger than themselves, a testament to the profound truth that sometimes, from our darkest moments, comes our greatest light. 20 years after the day Jack Mitchell plunged into the frozen waters of Cedar Lake, he sat on the porch of a modest cabin overlooking that same body of water. At 59, his hair had turned almost completely silver, and the lines around his eyes had deepened, markers of both laughter and challenges weathered over 2 decades of extraordinary life. Inside the cabin, voices and laughter mingled with the scent of coffee and cinnamon rolls. The Mitchell family reunion had become an annual tradition, bringing together not just his immediate family, but the extended circle of those whose lives had become intertwined with theirs through the Foundation's work. Emma, now 30, emerged from the cabin with 2 steaming mugs. She handed one to her father before settling into the chair beside him. Her career as an installation artist had flourished, with permanent pieces in museums and public spaces across 3 continents. Yet she remained grounded, using her platform to highlight stories of transformation and resilience. "Lily just called," she said, blowing gently on her coffee. "Her flight from Kenya was delayed, but she'll be here by dinner. The water reclamation project is officially operational." Jack nodded, pride warming him more than the coffee. Lily had channeled her passion for environmental science into developing sustainable water systems for communities affected by climate change. The Kenya project was her 3rd successful implementation, funded by a partnership between the Callaway Foundation and the United Nations. "And how are things with Ryan?" Jack asked, referring to Emma's fiancé, a former Mitchell Electric apprentice who now ran the company's international division. Emma smiled, the expression transforming her serious face. "Good. The Tokyo Center is fully staffed, and he'll be back next week. We've finally set a date, May 15th, here at the lake." Jack squeezed his daughter's hand. The thought of Emma getting married at Cedar Lake, the place that had nearly claimed her life but had ultimately shaped it in profound ways, seemed perfectly fitting, the circle completing itself once more. The cabin door opened again as Teresa Anderson stepped out, her twin boys, now 12 years old, racing past her toward the lake. "Nick, Christopher, life jackets first," she called after them. The Anderson family had been the first recipients of the Cedar Lake Legacy Fund 2 decades earlier, after losing their home to fire. Teresa had gone on to become the fund's director, overseeing assistance to hundreds of families facing similar catastrophic circumstances. Her sons had grown up alongside the Foundation's evolution, embodying its mission in their own emerging identities. "Those 2 remind me so much of Emma and Lily at that age," Jack observed, watching the boys don their safety gear before venturing onto the dock. Teresa laughed. "Except your girls were probably better behaved. Mine are perpetual motion machines." "Don't be fooled," Jack replied with a chuckle. "My 2 were handfuls in their own way, different personalities, same determination. The sound of vehicles approaching drew their attention to the gravel road leading to the cabin. Not black SUVs this time, but a modest sedan, followed by a medical transport van. From the car emerged Amanda Calloway, now in her 80s, but still elegant, her silver hair swept into a simple knot at the nape of her neck. The van parked behind her, and attendants carefully helped Robert Calloway into a wheelchair. At 90, the former tech magnate and philanthropist had grown frail physically, but his mind remained sharp and his spirit undimmed. The stroke 3 years earlier had affected his mobility, but not his vision or determination. Jack stood to greet them, emotion tightening his throat. Robert had become far more than a benefactor over the 20 years of their association. He was family, a surrogate father figure whose guidance had helped shape not just Jack's professional evolution, but his personal growth as well. "Right on time," Jack said, clasping the older man's thin hand. "The proverbial punctuality of Robert Calloway remains intact." Robert smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Some habits are worth maintaining, even at 90. His voice was softer now, but still carried the authoritative tone that had influenced boardrooms and policy chambers for decades. Amanda embraced Emma warmly before turning to Jack. "The drive was beautiful. The lake country in autumn is spectacular. I can see why you finally built the cabin here." Jack had purchased the lakefront property 5 years earlier, building a gathering place for the extended family the foundation's work had created. The cabin, with its large common areas and multiple bedrooms, had become the heart of their celebrations and retreats. "Is everyone else inside?" Robert asked, as his attendant wheeled him toward the ramp Jack had installed at the cabin's entrance. "Almost everyone," Jack confirmed. "Lily's flight from Kenya was delayed, and Alexandra's grandson has a soccer tournament, so they'll be along later. But the rest of the board is here, and most of the original team." The gathering was more than just a family reunion. It marked a transition in leadership. After 20 years as the executive director of the Calloway Mitchell Initiative, Jack was stepping into an emeritus role, with Emma taking over as creative director and Lily as Director of International Operations. The carefully planned succession would ensure the organization's mission continued with the same vision and integrity that had guided it from the beginning. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was warm and festive. Members of the Foundation's board mingled with program graduates, staff members, and family friends. On the walls hung photographs documenting 2 decades of growth and impact, training centers, graduation ceremonies, community projects, and family milestones. A large painting dominated the main wall, one of Emma's early works, showing Jack pulling the twins from the ice with stylized black SUVs in the background and ripples extending outward to touch scenes of transformation. It served as both personal history and organizational mission statement, a visual reminder of how a single moment had catalyzed decades of purposeful action. As evening approached, Lily finally arrived, windblown and apologetic, but radiant with news of the Kenya project's successful launch. The family gathered on the broad deck overlooking the lake, where tables had been arranged for the celebration dinner. Jack stood at the head of the main table, raising a glass as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks that reflected on the water's surface. Around him sat the people who had transformed his desperate plunge into the frozen lake into a legacy of compassion and action. His daughters, the Calloways, Foundation leadership, and representatives of the thousands of lives touched by their collective work. 20 years ago, Jack began, his voice steady despite the emotion welling within him. This lake taught us lessons about danger and courage, about loss and rescue. But its greatest lesson came afterward, that sometimes our most desperate moments can lead to our most meaningful purpose. He gestured toward Robert and Amanda Calloway. Some would call what happened after the accident a miracle. the arrival of those 10 black SUVs, the resources that transformed our lives. But I've come to believe the true miracle was in the connections formed, the purpose discovered, and the ripples that continue to expand beyond anything we could have imagined. Emma and Lily stood to join their father, completing the trinity that had stood at the center of the story from the beginning. Lily spoke next, her journalist's precision giving weight to each word. The Callaway-Mitchell Initiative has now assisted over 5,000 families in crisis, established 23 training centers across 4 continents, and partnered with governments and NGOs to implement sustainable support models globally. But numbers can't capture the human impact, the dignity restored, the potential unleashed, the generations altered. Emma completed their shared reflection. As we transition leadership today, we honor not just what has been built, but the spirit in which it was built, the belief that tragedy need not define us, that generosity creates possibility, and that purpose can emerge from our darkest moments. As applause rippled around the tables, Jack gazed out at Cedar Lake, now bathed in the golden light of sunset. The water that had nearly claimed his daughters' lives had become not a place of fear, but a symbol of transformation. From desperation to purpose, from struggle to impact, from near tragedy to extraordinary legacy, the black SUVs that had arrived on his street 20 years earlier had indeed delivered a miracle. Not as an endpoint, but as the beginning of a journey that continued to unfold through the lives they had touched and the changes they had catalyzed. From a father's desperate courage had emerged a legacy of compassion that would continue long after all of them were gone, rippling outward through generations yet unborn. As darkness fell and lights twinkled on around the lake, Jack Mitchell sat between his daughters, watching Robert Callaway share stories with Teresa's twin boys, the next generation of the extended family their shared journey had created. In that moment of connection across ages and experiences, Jack recognized the fullness of the miracle that had unfolded from that frozen January day. Not just lives saved, but purpose found. Not just assistance given, but meaning created. Not just a family preserved, but a mission born that would continue to transform lives long after the memory of 10 black SUVs had faded into the mists of time. The true miracle, Jack realized as he looked around at the faces illuminated by candlelight, and purpose had never been in the rescue or the resources. It had been in the ripples, the expanding circles of impact that flowed from one desperate moment of courage into a lifetime of deliberate compassion, connecting past to future through the unbreakable bonds of shared humanity and purposeful love. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.